Hello, today we are going to talk about personal computer hardware. If you were to build your own personal computer, what components do you need to put inside? This is a lesson for beginners that have never built their own PC, that have never programmed, and this is material that's taught in the first hours of computer literacy courses. So first of all, a computer might be in two forms. You might have a laptop, or you might have a desktop computer. We're going to go over the components of the desktop computer first. So this would be a desktop computer. The exterior is called the case, and inside we have the rest of the components. So in the bottom part, this is what's called the PSU, power supply unit. In here you enter energy power from your main socket. This converts your alternative current into all of the needed direct current voltages, and then these wires with various DC voltages get to the motherboard, to hard disks, in this case to a CD-ROM DVD drive, to a GPU, which is a graphics processing unit, which is a video card. Okay, so this is a list of hardware that you might find in a desktop personal computer. So you might have a printer. This is what's called a flatbed scanner, the one. Nowadays, printers and flatbed scanners are mushed together into an all-in-one that can print. So you tell the computer, hey, take this image from my desktop, from my screen, and put it on paper. Or you could scan, you put the paper in your all-in-one printer scanner, and you say whatever is on the paper, put it on my computer screen. Or you might do a Xerox copy, so you put a piece of paper inside, and that piece of paper is duplicated. It gives you the piece of paper back, and whatever was on the piece of paper, it also copies it on a new piece of paper. These are audio output devices, so PC speakers. This 14 is the mouse. Mice usually have 3 buttons, so there's the left button, the right button, and in the middle there's a scroll wheel. Scroll wheel can be clicked on, which acts as the middle mouse button, or the third mouse button. 13 is called the keyboard. It has 3 areas: alphanumeric, so 0 to 9, A to Z, space, enter. Then the 10 key, which are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then arithmetics operators, so plus, minus, division, multiplication. On top, there are the function keys. The top left one is the escape key, then F1, 2, 3, F5, F6, F7, F8, F9, 10, 11, 12, and these are the block with additional keys, and these 4 at the bottom, resembling of piece of something from the game of Tetris, are the direction arrow keys. So up arrow key, down arrow key, left arrow key, right arrow key. Okay, so these more complicated keys are delete and page up, page down, insert, home, print screen, scroll lock, pause, break. Okay, this is called a monitor. On the monitor you have what are called windows. So this is a window, a thing that you can move around on your screen. I click on what's called the window title bar, where the title of the window resides, and then I move the window around. I can press the maximize button, the minimize button, and the close button. So I'm going to press the maximize button to make this window cover my entire screen. Maximize left mouse click. Okay, this is a computer case that hosts the internal parts and internal components of the PC, of the personal computer. This 5 is the PSU, power supply unit, converts AC to various DC voltages. This 8 is the motherboard. There's a what's called CPU socket, so it has a ton of tiny holes. And this 2 is the CPU, central processing unit, or the processor. Has a ton of pins on the back, and you need to place all of the pins inside of all of the holes. So you put the CPU inside of its socket. Then there's random access memory array, RAM slots, 1, 2, 3 in this case, and then this is a RAM bar or slot, or so you put the RAM inside of its slot, and then these are extension cards and their slots. So the slots are part of the motherboard. There's slots for the CPU, for the RAM, and for the extension cards, whereas the CPU, RAM, and extension cards are separate, and you buy them separate. You buy them separate in different boxes, you unbox them, and then you put each component in its own slot. So such an extension card might be a GPU, general graphics processing unit, or a video accelerator. Okay, nowadays not all computers have optical disk drives, so this 6 would be a DVD drive, a Blu-ray drive, a CD drive. And then 7 shows a storage, so might be a hard disk or a SSD, solid storage. Okay. So another view of the components that reside inside of the case. So this is again the case that holds all of the pieces together. You screw, the first thing that you do, you take the motherboard and you screw it in its position. It has 1, 2, 3, a number of screws that you screw them down such that the motherboard does not move. The next thing, you screw the PSU, power supply unit, inside of the case. Then you take the bunch of cables and start connecting them to the motherboard in here, in the yellow connector in this case, and also in here, in the 4-pin connector. Then you put the CPU in its slot, you put the extension card in its slot, and then you need storage, which in this case is hard disks. You can put them in here. I can see one in here. You can put them in this larger area, or on the back of on the other side of this plate. Okay. If you have a optical unit, so a Blu-ray drive, a DVD drive, or a CD-ROM, then you're forced to put it where you have space for it, which is this bay with larger, that's wider, that has enough space for a optical unit. And then in order to access to put CDs inside of the unit, you need to remove one of the parts of plastic, one of the covers that are on the front of the computer. Okay. So again, most of the people have laptops, way newer than this from 2005, and desktop computers. This is the old type of monitor that's called a CRT monitor, cathode ray tube. Nowadays we have LED monitors. Okay. This is also an old laptop. And back to desktop computers. Okay, so a Dell desktop computer with Dell everything, Dell monitor, Dell keyboard, Dell mouse, and Dell central unit, so PC case. And in here we can see that this is the place where you put optical discs inside of your drive. There's this eject button. You put your disc there, and then you press the eject button again to close the lid. And this is something even older, which is called a floppy disk drive. Okay. Usually on the front of the computer you have the following. If you had optical drives, this is where you'll find them, in the front of the computer. If you have floppy drives, then there. Then there will be a maybe a start button and a power button, or maybe just one button. If there's a restart and power button, so two different buttons, then pressing them does what you think it does. So reset will reset the computer, power down will shut down the computer. If you have just one button, then it might be the action that that button performs is configurable. It might be that pressed shortly, so you just press the button, it will reboot the computer. But if you keep it longer than, I don't know, 20 seconds, it will shut down in a not recommended way the computer. But sometimes the only way to really shut down the computer is to either plug the power, so plug the computer's connector from the main plug, or to press the shutdown button for a long time, for half a minute. This will make the computer shut down abruptly, without saving your work. But sometimes a computer might be so stuck that that's the only way for you to actually reset your computer. And when something does not work inside of your computer on your screen, when you have a problem, then if you're going to call for support, say something does not work on my computer, what should I do? The very first thing that they always tell you is have you restarted correctly your computer? And it's really important for you to know your computer enough such that you can restart it completely correctly. So you either plug it out of the main socket or you press the power or the reset buttons correctly. Okay. This is an even older computer with CRT cathode ray tube monitor. Okay. So let's now look at the first piece of hardware that you would buy. That piece of hardware then decides most of the rest of the components that you need. So that piece of hardware is called the motherboard. So motherboard might also be named a main circuit board, a MB, or a baseboard, or a main board. Okay. Let's look at the Amazon.com offering for motherboards. So I searched for motherboard and then AM4. So AM4 is a series of motherboards that I also use and I like. And the prices are very reasonable. Okay, so the series B450 or B550 is really good. Okay, let's choose and pick one and see where each component is. So what's this? Ryzen 3 5000, PCIe 3. Okay, sounds okay. Don't we have a... Okay, so this one does not seem to have Wi-Fi. Let's find one that has such a thing. This doesn't have it either. Let's open this image in an image editor, if it works. And let's look at the components. So this is the motherboard. Let me remove the unneeded parts. Ctrl C, create from clipboard. Okay. So this is what a motherboard is a piece of plastic that's not that tall, and it has certain sizes depending on the standard that it follows. The most common standard is M80X, which is called micro ATX. Okay. So micro ATX is 24 centimeters by 24 centimeters. Okay, so it's a square. Which is interesting. There are smaller motherboards than the standard micro ATX, which is 24 by 24. The other ones are extended ATX, and what I use is ITX. So ITX is a square 17 centimeters by 17 centimeters. Okay, so once you have the motherboard, you will need to place the rest of the components on top. Okay, let's paint all of the slots. Okay, so let's look at the slots where we can put the rest of the components on the motherboard. So this is the slot for the CPU, central processing unit or processor. You put it in here. You use this lever, this one here. You should look up on the internet, on YouTube, how to actually place your CPU inside. Be extra careful not to bend any of the pins when you insert them in their slots. Okay. The next thing that you insert in slots is RAM. You usually have either one stick or two sticks. In this case, this is a lever that you need to push in this direction. To open the slot, then you put the piece of RAM inside, and then you close this plastic lever back. Okay. Then you're going to need to see if you have other extension cards. The most common again is the one for the GPU, graphics processing unit, especially for playing video games. There's two slots that you can choose from in this example motherboard. So this is one, it's named PCIe1. In here it says PCIe1. And then there's PCIe2, this shorter one. So this is a subset of pins. In here you can see all of the pins on the top row and on the bottom row. The same thing exists in here. So there's a top row of pins and the bottom row of pins. And then there's this separator, this, and here. So all of the extension cards that you can put in the slot 2, you can also put in the slot 1, but it will not use all of the PCIe pins. It will use just the ones that it can use. So your extension card will look something like this and have many pins in here on the bottom, and then you place all of the pins in these holes, or you can place the same extension card in here and use up just this number of pins. The rest of the pins on the motherboard will be not used. Okay, and then there's another one, another PCIe slot, which is this one. So you have 4 PCIe slots. A long one, short one, long one, short one. This is special because it has a bit of metal around it, and it's meant for GPUs because it provides a bit of extra support for your graphical processing unit, for the extension card. Because it contains a bit of metal, they say that the extension card will sit better in there, will sit more firm, will not move or wobble. But I'm not sure that this is the case. Okay, once you put your extension card in its PCIe slot, the next thing to do is hidden in here, and you need to unscrew these 2 screws. This one and this one. And in here you will put your storage, which is NVMe SSD. Okay. Let's look at each of the component and see how they fit in the bigger picture. Okay. Let's go to Amazon.com and say NVMe SSD. Let's also say Samsung. Okay. So this is the current golden standard, which is called Samsung N970 Evo Plus. And it looks like this. Okay. Scaler, how do we scale it down? Okay, so this thing, the SSD, the storage, will need to be placed under this sink. So this piece of metal is a heat dissipator. You place it on top of the SSD in order to dissipate heat. So it's called a sink. So you unscrew it here. You put this thing in its slot. So it slots in. There's a hidden slot there, which looks like this one. So this is the way you use it. So this is the SSD NVMe component, and then you slot it into its slot. So this is a SSD slot. Oof. Slot it inside, and then there's this screw that you need to use. You unscrew this screw and you screw this hole and that hole together. Okay. If you put it in this slot, then theoretically it will dissipate some heat and it will not cool down as effectively as if you put it between the motherboard and this piece of metal, the black one. Okay. Search here. Okay. Let's see how a CPU looks like. So for AM4 CPU, we're using a vendor that's called AMD and a CPU that's called Ryzen. So this one, 3200G, is kind of old. 5600X is a really good and newer CPU. This is kind of old, 3000. So 3 means the generation. So 3 is, I know, 4 years ago, and 5 is, I know, 1 year ago. So this string 300G, so 5 means recent, 300 means not that powerful, and G means that it also contains an integrated GPU, iGPU. So you don't need a separate dedicated GPU extension board. Okay, so let's take this one, for instance. Okay, so on the bottom there's a large number of pins. I don't know, 200, 400, a very large number of pins. Control C, Control V. Okay, so this thing, you slot it in, there's many holes, and this component has many pins, so you place each of the pin in the hole, in its own hole. Okay. What's next? A RAM. AM4 DDR4 RAM. Let's go 16 gigabytes. Okay, so they come in all sorts of colors and RGB lighting, etc. Or might be just. So this has a bit of a cooling solution on top of it. A bit of metal to dissipate heat. But might be just a plain circuit board, plain piece of plastic. Like this one. Okay. So let's see how this thing looks like. Efficiently dissipates heat from each module so that they consistently run at high clock speeds. Okay, so let's take this. Okay. Okay, so this thing, you place it in one of these 4 slots. It's kind of, you will need to know into which slot you want to put your RAM. The slots are numbered. On the motherboard there's a text where it says, I know, DDR1, DDR2, 3, 4 or something. You find the one with the smaller number, and that's where you should put the RAM. Okay, and make sure you place all of these pins in their own hole, and there's this splitter in here, so there's a pin that's missing in here and one that's extra in here. This one, where are you? So these are extra in here, and this is missing in here. So make sure you match it correctly, so there's fewer number of pins here and more number of pins here. Okay, so with this number of components on motherboard, SSD, storage, central processing unit, and one piece of RAM, you are almost ready to start your computer. You don't need a case, you don't need almost anything. What's really important to have right now is some way to power everything. Let's make this thing wider. Layer, where are you? Layer to image size. Canvas size. 12, non-white resize. Okay, so it refused to put white there. Let's fill it with white. Yes. Okay. So let's get a PSU. Okay, so a PSU is important to buy a good one, because if this thing doesn't work correctly, it might ignite. So make sure you always power off your computer when you're leaving for a number of days your house. Okay. So it looks like this. It's a block with a standard volume, a standard size, and it might have or not a large number of cables coming out of it. Okay, so this bunch of cables might exist or not. If the bunch of cables does not exist, then there's these connectors where you can you have, I don't know, in the packaging with the PSU 10 different cables, and those cables you need to plug in the correct connector in here. Okay, inside is just transformers. Make sure this thing doesn't whine and doesn't you cannot hear it when it's not doing anything. And this one doesn't even have a fan. Or it does on the exterior. Okay. Okay, so you take this thing, where is it? Control C, Control V, layer, scale, 300. Scale, okay. So this thing has on one side the entry where you put AC power from your outlet, from your main socket. In here is the main switch, so it's turned off right now on position O, and you put it on position I where it's started. And then on the other side there's these slots. So in these slots you put a cable connector that comes with a power supply unit, PSU, and then you connect the following parts with it. So you need to connect the big connector. Where are you? So the big connector is this guy. The main connector of the motherboard. It's called ATA. Okay. The second place that you connect is this 4 or 8 additional motherboard power. And that's it. Okay. So right now, if you give power in this connector and switch the power supply unit to on, the motherboard will receive power from here and from here. The motherboard will send power to the CPU, to the RAM slots and to the RAM, and to the SSD storage. And then on the motherboard there's this thing, this round battery, which is called the RTC battery, real-time clock battery. And this thing is connected to a small circuit that contains what's called the basic input-output system, or the UFI. So that's the first thing that the motherboard powers on. And then that thing and the CPU decide that there exists a RAM in one of these slots, tests that the RAM is okay, trains the RAM, and then it can show the user interface for the UFI BIOS, which looks like this. this blue and white text on your monitor, where you can configure various things. So once you have power, motherboard, CPU and storage and RAM, not even storage, you can get to this part of the user interface. So the computer can start and get to here. Then if you have storage, that will appear inside of the BIOS, inside of the UEFI, in this list where it will say SATA, SSD, and then the name of the thing. Okay. But for this you will need a monitor. So let's get a monitor. So we go computer, LED, monitor. Let's make it 32 inch. Okay. Let's get a very good one. So good ones means IPS or VA. IPS with HDR10. What is this? A too good one. Should be one of the cheapest components of your computer. I know, this thing. Okay, so simple, plain, just a smaller TV set, right? IPS, it will be very similar to your living room TV, but your living room TV is probably 42 inches diagonal, whereas this one is just 32 inches diagonal, so it's a smaller TV that's connected to your motherboard. Okay. Okay, let's put this into action. Layers, scale layer, 300. Okay, so this is the monitor. So the monitor has on the bottom side, in this case, buttons. So there's a button to turn it on and switch it off, and other buttons to set the hue, luminosity, contrast, etc. So don't touch those, leave them as they are. And in the back there's probably 3 connectors, a newer DisplayPort one, a newer HDMI one, and an older D-sub connector. Okay, so let's say that we are going to use the HDMI connector. So in the back you need an HDMI cable, and you plug it in where? This slot here. Okay, and now your computer starts, but you can also see what it does when it starts. So you will get to the UEFI screen, to this place. Okay, let's select this thing. Control C, Control V, layer, scale layer, 200. Okay, so now you have this on your monitor. Once you get to this spot, you're really far ahead, and the rest are just going to be finishing touches. But getting here is the most part of the road. Okay, so motherboard, CPU, which is called a processor, a piece of RAM, a piece of storage. Okay, let's put text here. So this thing is a CPU. This thing is a RAM. Okay, this is a SSD. The rest of this black thing is the motherboard. Okay, and this thing is the monitor. And this thing is the UFB BIOS. And this thing is the power supply unit PSU. Okay, once you get at this spot, again, you're way more than 70% of the way to having a working computer. Let's save this thing. So, PSU monitor motherboard things. Okay, what's missing? You want to be able to move inside of the UFI BIOS. So you want to press the tab key, the up down arrow keys to go up and down this menu. You want to press escape to exit this BIOS together. Okay, so for that you will need two other components, which is the mouse and the keyboard. Let's get a mouse and a keyboard. Computer mouse. Okay. What is this? Amazon Basics. 3-button wired mouse. Okay. This is what we're taking. Layers, scale, 0. Okay, so this is the mouse. You scroll with the middle scroll, and there's two other buttons, the left one and the right one. Okay, and this connector is called a USB type A connector, and you place it in here or here. Where are we? Okay. The next component is the keyboard. Computer keyboard. What should we choose here? Doesn't really matter. They're cheap. If you don't like it, you test another keyboard from a friend of yours and see if maybe that's better for your fingers, and then you buy that instead. I don't know, everybody knows how a keyboard looks like, so I'm not even going to bother to put it in this image. Okay, and it will have the same type of connector, USB type A, and there's, I don't know, 6 USB A connectors on this motherboard, so you just use this long cord and plug the USB A in its slot on the motherboard. Okay, so now you have mouse and keyboard, and you can navigate the UEFI BIOS. You can move through the pages from main to config, from config to datetime, and then to security, startup, restart, etc. Okay. From this moment on, everything else is fluff. So if you don't have kids, if you don't have pets, you can use it like as it is. You can, I don't know, stick it on a wall or put it in a drawer or something. Yeah, we forgot about the thing that keeps the CPU cool enough to survive. So we'll need that too. So we need a CPU cooler. AMD cooler. Okay. The solution that I always recommend is this guy. So this should be $20 US. This guy. So this, let's put it on top of the CPU. Control C. Where are you? Control V. Okay, so this thing has a metal block on the bottom with copper pipes, and on the top it has a plastic part that contains a ventilator, a fan. So this spins because you connect it to the motherboard to the CPU fan slot. Okay, you place it on top of the CPU, and this piece of metal will get connected here. So this hole, this white thing, you need to place it on this piece of plastic, this black piece of plastic. And then there's another pair of hole and piece of plastic on the top of the CPU. socket on the motherboard. And then you feed this thing with power from the CPU fan connector. So this is the sys fan connector, not this one, sys fan. We want a CPU fan. Sys fan 2, sys fan 1, not this one, CPU fan, this guy. So you connect this with this. It says CPU fan. Okay. If you don't put a CPU fan, a CPU cooling solution, the CPU will get hotter and hotter, will get to 50 degrees Celsius, then it will get hotter and hotter, it will get to 90 degrees Celsius, which is really much for a CPU, and then it will start to throttle. So in order to prevent the CPU from getting to 100 degrees Celsius and melting, the CPU will start to shut down half of its functions, 80% of its functions, 99% of its functions, such that it keeps functioning, but with only a fraction of its power. That will consume a fraction of current, and that will dissipate a fraction of heat. So it will generate as little heat as possible, because it has a metal lid on top of it if you don't have the cooler, and this lid dissipates some heat, but a really small amount of heat. So the CPU will throttle down and use extremely small amount of energy, such that it creates an extremely small amount of heat, which can be dissipated by its lid, its metal lid. Okay, and now you have a computer that even if you use, will not get too hot, because this radiator is really powerful for this CPU. We've put just a 35 watt CPU, and then if needed, the fan will start to spin. So this fan does nothing if you configure it to not spin if the CPU has a temperature of 0 to, I don't know, 70 degrees Celsius. If it hits 70 degrees Celsius, then you can tell the motherboard, hey, start spinning the fan of the CPU cooler. And once the fan starts, the CPU cools down extremely fast, like it will jump from 70 degrees to 50 degrees in a matter of seconds. And what the fan does, it extracts heat from the CPU, and it blows the heat away from the CPU. So it takes heat from here, puts the heat on the metal part of the CPU cooler, and then from that metal part of the CPU cooler, it sucks it in the fan, and then the fan exhausts it out, exhausts hot air. Okay. So again, there's people that don't use more components than this, I know, wall pieces or something. This thing, so you can put it on your wall. You don't need any extra components. But this is not a solution that people usually choose. People will usually put all of these components inside of a PC case. So let's look at a PC case and see what's that. We said ATX. Okay. I don't like cases with glass. I like cases with a ton of holes inside. So I don't know what to choose because everybody, all of the most cases have a bit of glass. This thing is probably huge. So I go for smaller cases because again, our computer looks like this. It's just a piece of printed circuit board and with some components on top. We don't have external hard disks. We don't have external optical drives. We don't have a floppy drive. We don't have a extra GPU, nothing else. So everything is really, really flat, except the CPU cooler, which is quite tall. Okay, so let's go for the smallest M8XX. This thing is probably too small. This thing has glass and probably the CPU fan is too tall for the glass. Okay, so I would go for the smallest thing that I can get. This also comes with its own PSU power supply unit, so you don't need to buy an actual power supply unit. It comes with one. So in this case, it's 150 watt. So our central processing unit CPU draws 35 watt maximum and will never reach 150 watt power consumption in this case. So this case would be enough. But with the ugliness that the cooler will not fit in here, so you will need to cut a bit of this mesh and let the cooler protrude a bit from the case. But I think it's really fine. Like that. That's what I would do. Okay. So we have motherboard, CPU, cooler, RAM, SSD, monitor, mouse and PSU and keyboard. We've put that thing in a PC case. And what is missing? Yeah, that's about it. The next step now is to install an operating system. So this is usually Windows or might be Linux. For that you will need a way to install it. You will need a USB stick. Let's say 32 gigabytes should be more than enough. Okay. So this is a USB type A connector. You slot it inside of the, you put a Windows or a Linux installer on the USB stick. You ask somebody to do that. And then you just take this USB stick from their computer where they put the installer for Windows on the stick, and you plug it into one of your USB connectors on the motherboard. So here, here, or here. Okay. You will also need an internet connection with an Ethernet cable that looks like this. Like this, you get a piece of internet cable with two connectors that's long enough from the place where you have your monitor, where you have your PC case, to your Wi-Fi router, to the place in your house where your internet service provider has put the Wi-Fi router, such that you can get internet without any wireless things. So a very wired internet, which is the best, the speediest, the promptest, the everything. And because you have a PC case, you're not going to move that PC case like never. You're going to put it under your desk or on your desk, and it will not move from there. So if it doesn't move, why not use wired Ethernet? So do use that. It's better in any aspect than Wi-Fi. It's not congested, better download and upload speeds, better ping time. Everything is just better by using wired Ethernet instead of wireless internet. Okay, so don't go for wireless for your desktop computer. Okay, so now you put your USB stick inside of one of the USB slots. You install then the operating system, so Windows in this case. You put on the special slots over here, you put the Ethernet cable that you just bought. And now you have, you can connect to the internet. You have a web browser, and which is Microsoft Edge on Windows 11 or Windows 10. And then you can install more web browsers like Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, and then other additional applications that you use, I don't know, Zoom or whatever you use, Microsoft Office. Okay. The next step is to get an all-in-one printer. Okay, I would go for HP, not Canon, and I would go not ink, but and not color. I would go black and white. I don't know what it's suggesting in here, but I totally do not want ink. I do not want to buy ink cartridges. I don't want strange colors. Okay, let's select not to have ink shown. How do we do that? Laser computer printers. Okay. Then let's select HP. Okay, do we have some results or not? Click to see price. And not color. Black and white. How do we change that? Monochrome. This does not have a three function. It has just one function. Because I can see it outputs the paper on the top, so there's no place to have a a scanner. Whereas in here I can see the scanner is on top. So this lid opens and you put the paper that you want to copy there, and then the all-in-one printer, scanner, copier knows how to copy what you have put in here, and the output is presented here. And in the bottom is the probably the paper and the toner. So that's what I would buy. HP and 3-in-1. So this is the lid for the scanner copier. This is the lid for the scanner copier. This is the lid for the scanner copier. This is not a 3-in-1 because it doesn't allow you to copy. Okay, so that's in. The rest are just additional nice to haves, like I know you might have a, where are you? Bluetooth speaker. I know, something like this, JBL Flip 4. In order to put your computer to play music into the entire room. Or maybe headphones. Something like this, or smaller, or Bluetooth speakers, headset, microphone. Okay. Even the cheapest ones from Sennheiser are way more than enough. Like this guy, PC5 chat. Okay. So this is it. We have a computer, motherboard, CPU, cooler, RAM, SSD, monitor, mouse, keyboard, PSU, case, and a 3-in-1 copier, scanner, and printer. And that's about all of the components that exist inside of the computer. As to what each component does, the mouse moves your cursor on the screen, this thing where I move my cursor. The keyboard enters text, where I wrote in here RAM, I used my keyboard. The monitor is for you to see what the computer does. PSU power supply unit, it converts AC alternative current to DC direct current for the two slots that we use. On the motherboard, to connect the PSU, a case hosts everything such that you don't accidentally touch the motherboard while it's powered on, so you get a short circuit or something. Okay. You connect the monitor using HDMI or DisplayPort or D-sub. You connect the mouse and keyboard usually using USB. Then you have a USB stick such that you can install on this thing, on the storage SSD, your operating system such as Windows. And with that you have everything that you would ask from a desktop computer. But again, nowadays people don't use this much desktop computers the way they used to 15 years ago. Nowadays almost everybody is using a laptop computer. And laptop computer parts are just desktop computer parts but smaller, which consume less energy, less power, generate less heat. They're tinier, use less metal such that they are easier to carry around. Smaller form factors. The monitor is not 32 inches, I don't know, 14 inch, such that you can put it, your entire laptop, in your bag. Consumes a small amount of power such that you can use your computer without plugging it into the power socket for a number of hours, such that you can use it, I don't know, on a train or on a plane. But once you know the components of a desktop computer, then you will have no problem identifying the components of a laptop computer. Again, they're just smaller and more efficient versions of the desktop counterparts, of the desktop parts. So this is it. Thank you.